Hey, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. Coming back from Lake Atitlan in what was 3 very beautiful days by the lake, staying at the Yoga Forest Hotel, hanging out with some very cool people, very like-minded people, talking about all kinds of things. I got into 6-hour-long conversations that were incredibly energizing and fresh and a very pleasant time. Got to connect with a lot of people there. So I thought I'd share a couple of thoughts on a book that I was reading while I was there. The book is called Letting Go by a guy called David Hawken, who is a very interesting guy. If you find any of his YouTube lectures, I highly recommend that. And this is the second book that I read from him. And it's funny because I've stumbled across his work in several different ways. And so I had been listening to, or rather I'd read a book of his called Power versus Force, and then I found him on YouTube, and I didn't even make the connection at the time, and it was the same guy. So Power versus Force is a very highly recommended book, by the way. It talks about a scale of consciousness that David sort of captured, if you will. These things are not invented, obviously. They're more sort of found. And but this time around I've been focusing on the book Letting Go by David Hawken, and for some reason it seemed like the right thing to read, and funny enough I was quite on the dot about that one. So the main learning behind this stuff is very interesting to me, because I have been cultivating the stability of my awareness for quite some time now. And for a few months I had started to do shadow work. Shadow work described as the intentional going into painful memories and feelings in an attempt to re-trigger them. But this time around, you observe them with mindful awareness, and that observation resolves the trauma that is otherwise left sort of buzzing in your system and always living right beneath the surface and ready to be triggered by apparently innocuous events in your life that suddenly make you feel extremely uncomfortable. And the external event is, or rather the degree of discomfort that you feel is out of proportion with the magnitude of the external event. And that's when you know that a trauma has been triggered. Common expression to describe that is when you say that you've hit a nerve with someone, right? You've triggered something that is far beyond the event. So when you start to do shadow work, it takes quite a bit of courage to do it, in all fairness, because there's a lot of unpleasant stuff lurking right beneath, and it doesn't take that much to have it come to the surface. All you need to do is cut out your little distractions and sit quietly on a Sunday afternoon and let all the loneliness and boredom pop up, and right beneath that, there's all the trauma just waiting to be expressed. So it's very easy to trigger it. But then the question is, what do you do once it's there, right? And I have to say that my understanding of that was logically complete, but experientially limited. And so logically, I knew that I had to release those emotions and let them run their course. and that I had to simply observe with mindfulness and equanimity, and stability of focus, right? And that over time, this sort of, it kind of files off the emotion and it sort of de-energizes it, so that little by little they are not traumatic anymore. They are just regular emotions, and you can deal with them fairly easy, and you can see them for what they really are. Now, what started to happen though is that my sort of little achiever nature started to get the better out of the process at some point, and I found myself, in retrospect, as usual, trying to control the emotion and teach the emotion who's the boss, so to speak, right? So now that I have the sword of awareness, which can essentially cut through anything, every time an unpleasant emotion was triggered, and I, well, not every time, but often, instead of befriending it, I would try to observe it to death, so to speak. I'm like, I now possess the big laser of, conscious awareness. I burn through you, right? It's like, and it is a laser, right? You can use your conscious focus of awareness and essentially burn a hole through anything, any object of observation, including an emotion. But the problem with that is that it is what in Tai Chi would be described as double heavy. And I'll explain what that means, because it's a very important concept. So in Tai Chi, what you're trying to achieve is the perfect balance between Yin and Yang at all times. That neutrality, in which the greatest power sits, or within which the greatest power sits. In our Western mentality, or in the modern world mentality rather, it's all about Yang. It's all about achieving, getting things done, showing no weakness, being linear and penetrating, and battling the forces of evil or whatever, and being righteous, right? And in the external world, that tends to pay off, right? It tends to pay off. It is a very crude type of approach, but if you want results, it's better than just allowing whatever to happen, because then things just sort of crumble like spaghetti, right? And so we tend to become very Yang in our approach to things, including shadow work or mindfulness. So what happens is that instead of having Yin and Yang, you are what's called double heavy. So you have Yang and Yang, and that is very brittle, very aggressive, very ineffective, and just suboptimal on almost every level, or on every level rather, on every level. Even though it might give you a false illusion of power and this idea that you are getting things done, it's you're creating more trouble through a double Yang approach. And so, as obvious as it sounds, the counterpart of that is the Yin, or the letting go or the surrendering element of shadow work, right? In other words, in order to really dissolve traumas and integrate them, you don't use awareness to try to control them or teach them who's boss, or burn them away through sheer force of focus, but rather you use awareness in order to bring them to the conscious surface, so that they can be surrendered to and completely accepted. It's very counterintuitive, right? Because you think, if I accept this emotion, it's gonna kill me, or it's gonna take me over. But the opposite is the case. When you bring a nasty emotion to the surface fully, and you accept it fully, with awareness, so awareness and acceptance combined, that is yin and yang, and the emotion stands no chance of surviving that, because it has nothing to fight against which to fight. The friction has been eliminated from the equation, and a nasty emotion is nothing but friction. It's nothing but heat. It is in fact nothing but lack of acceptance, right? And that lack of acceptance is what creates that friction and that unpleasant heat that we feel and that we don't like to feel. So that is interesting, because there'll be people who might think that, well, then it's all about surrender, but awareness doesn't matter that much, and it'll happen when it happens or whatever. But that's double heavy again. That's yin yin, right? What we're looking for is, you want to have relentless awareness, absolutely 100% of the time, always there, always looking, always alert. You are, as Eckhart Tolle would say, the constant guardian of your inner state. But the awareness is being used only as the vehicle, so that equanimity and surrender can be then applied, right? Without the equanimity and surrender, the awareness is not enough, because you could stay in awareness for a very long time, and the emotion will keep popping up over and over and over and over again. And the reason for that is that the friction has not been eliminated from the approach, right? There has not been surrender or acceptance or letting go or true equanimity to let the emotion run its course, which is all it wants to do, really. So there you have it, right? So the big discovery for me, and it's again, right? So it's not as if you don't know this. It's not as if I didn't know that focus, awareness, and equanimity are the elements that you bring to the practice, whether it's meditation proper or shadow work. But it is very tempting to be double heavy. It's very tempting to take once you have the sword of awareness, it's very tempting to try and just take it and go around chopping everything up with it. Whereas in fact, the sword of awareness is there to only open the gateway for the emotion to then fully express itself, and to do so in a bubble of surrender and equanimity. And it is that element that integrates the emotion and de-energizes it, so that it doesn't have to pop up again, because it's been resolved. It's played itself out in a controlled environment. So I've made some videos about this in the past, more related to kind of anxiety and fearful episodes, and how viewing them as a puppy that needs love is one nice frame of mind from which to approach something unpleasant happening inside of you. But this is once again coming full circle into the whole letting go element. Now, the book is very, very good, actually, right? Even if this point hits home, there's plenty in the book that is just worth reading, I would say. It's very it's well written to my mind. Sometimes it goes a little bit into examples and things which are a little bit redundant for me, right? Depending on where you are and how much you understand, some of these things can feel a little bit redundant. But in general, I would say that it's a very good book. And in fact, the guy, David Hawken, is a very interesting character in himself, because he was not a mystic, and yet he became fully realized. I don't know if you can claim that he was a Buddha on some level. But what you can claim is that he had what you can call the flip. That he crossed that threshold beyond which the sense of self was completely, or the ego self was completely transcended. In other words, it's one thing to become awakened, and it's another one to become fully realized. And what he claims is that the letting go technique, in other words, the ability to, at every instant, be surrendered to whatever is happening and whatever your reaction is to that happening. He claims that he did that for 3.5 years, that at every step of that journey, and that I can confirm to the degree that I've applied it, that at every step, the energy in your body and your outlook on life improves over and over. It's just like this upward spiral that is unstoppable. And what happened to him is that he applied that relentlessly. So he was relentless in his letting go, so to speak, right? Again, yin and yang. And that he describes the episode in which he was doing this for 11 days straight this one time, more intensely than he had ever done before. And then it happened. He became enlightened. He walked into a restaurant on a rainy Sunday afternoon, and suddenly the entire world just flipped, right? Like his entire perception flipped. And the notion is funny how he describes it. He says that the notion of him being a separate self, or him being a mind and a body, struck him as completely absurd. Like he could not for the life of him understand how he could have ever been tricked into thinking that he was as limited as his body mind, because he had completely transcended it through just a constant surrender and a constant letting go of whatever was taking place in the moment. Mind you, it didn't come with it wasn't always smooth. He also talks about an episode in which he had a kind of very very intense mind attack, if you will, right? So there was a lot coming up at some point, and I think he mentioned it lasted for about a week or so, and the latter part of that week was spent in a cabin with zero distractions, which made it even worse. And he started to ask himself, like, is this ever going to stop, right? Because it was a lot of emotion and it was very intense. So it seems to be that that we need to go through this kind of thing in order to clear out all the muck. And but what's interesting though, and I can attest to that as it happens to me, as it's happening, because I have had a couple of those episodes, fortunately not an entire week or whatever, but I've had weekends of very critical emotional release. I can attest to the fact that that there's a lot of energy that gets liberated after you do that, and that you feel so much better because you're cleaning the pipes. And David describes this very clearly, and I believe it completely, actually. The fact that you are pure bliss, if not for the fact that you have all this accumulated unresolved emotional kinks in the hose, right? And that why would you not want to resolve them? Once you get a taste for how to resolve them, what it feels like, and the fact that you can survive pretty much any emotional episode, it almost becomes a thing that you start to systematically do, because you've now understood the price you pay for not engaging in this work and not resolving your trauma, and the fact that this is, it's kind of, it saps your life away. You're not really living, you're just protecting all the time, so long as these sore spots are right beneath the surface of your emotional skin. And that takes a lot of energy, and it's just, your world becomes very small, right? Because of that unwillingness to go through just a few very, very nasty moments in which you have to just hold on to everything you've got and let it happen. I had a fleeting thought in the back of my head. Let me see if I can capture it before I call it a video. And it was related to this idea that the bliss is always underneath. Ah, yeah. So the other point that he made indeed is that so long as these unresolved traumas are there, they are right beneath the surface, right? You don't. They are very easily triggered. They are not. They're hiding in plain sight, so to speak, and that because it takes very little to ruin your day when these things are there, finding them is actually quite easy, and it just shows this idea that you need to resolve them as quick as you can. Now, I haven't hit home with that point because I haven't quite remembered. It had to do with the fact that they are right, they're ready to be triggered at all times. Yeah. So is this thought that you're walking around as this protected thing that needs to be protected all the time because there's a lot of these sore spots right under the surface. Maybe I'll make a different video if the point comes back to me in its full import. But so that's the idea, right? Not being double heavy in your approach to mindfulness and shadow work and trauma resolution. Trauma resolution is not about control, using your awareness to control the feelings or show them who's boss. Is about using your awareness to bring them up into the conscious threshold of your awareness, so that they can be resolved with equanimity and surrender. So surrender is the magic sauce in the end. Well, awareness and focus and surrender or equanimity are it's like a three-legged stool. You need all of those in order for the work to be effective. I hope that helps. I hope it was an interesting video, and I'll probably make a couple more. Cheers.